You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
We got a lot to cover up.
So guys,
what's going on?
Greg Kading is out. His lawyer won't let him do it, so
we've been waiting around for Kading all day, and
and now
he's not
he's a
coming.
no-show.
Really, I wanted to talk to him because there's so much to ask him.
Yeah.
Puffy was going up the stairs, and he said, I don't care if Tupac died, I don't care if Biggie gotta die, and I don't care if Suge gotta go to prison for the rest of his life.
We got a confession letter on how everything went down and who's responsible.
Now, getting back to Russell was following in the footsteps of his dad, and he was able to work through the LAPD and have all the things that had to be done within the LAPD. He certainly knew the streets very well, and circumstances in his case were far more tragic because he was killed in the line of duty.
If that's the case, did Tupac life mean anything? Because they never saw that case. Sometimes if you saw the first case, you might have saw the second case. But that never happened, correct?
Yep.
But he did testify reluctantly that Death Row Records security chief Reggie Wright Jr. once told him, quote, "We're going to get those mothers who downed Pac."
Through interviews of former police officers that worked in the Death Row organization, Mac and Gaines were identified as confidants of Suge Knight, the owner of Death Row Records. They were present during private death row parties, and that's where first time that we were able to really make the connection between those two.
She don't want to get caught in a situation. That's why she was going to snatch the money from Knight and them, and there don't be no money, because she can't see the big picture, and she don't understand the big picture. She don't understand the master and how it can be levied and how we can go and do what we need to do with it. She don't understand that.
Ice and I, we've heard consistently, Suge, that you're the person behind the hit on Biggie.
Well, they looked at y'all and told y'all to ass live.
Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too, but see, because Perez and Reg was good friends, and Perez and Sharita and Reg is great friends, and so all those three together was trying to plot.
A reportedly missing photograph and former police chief Bernard Park's daughter came up during testimony today in the wrongful death lawsuit filed against the city by murdered rap star Biggie Smalls' mother.
That, to me, was probably another motive for Chief Parks to want to squash a lot of the information. There was an effort to keep a lot of the information away from the public.
This declaration from a jailhouse informant named Kenny Boagni links crooked LAPD officers David Mack and Rafael Perez to the murder of rap star Biggie Smalls.
Okay. Right? You see, Suge was willing to say, I didn't know those two cops, but maybe Reggie knew them.
Never met those dudes. They never worked for me. They knew Reggie right. They didn't know me.
You always will tell you, those are Reggie people.
And Reggie was fast to say, I didn't know them either.
I was just interested in why he would point the finger at Suge so quick. He wouldn't say it to you, but he definitely pointed it. We call that dry snitching.
That Perez told how he worked security for Death Row Records the night Biggie Smalls was assassinated, and how he and Mac used cell phones to set up the hit. Boagni now says he was instructed by an LAPD detective to share his story with no one else investigating Biggie's murder. Judge Florence Marie Cooper says LAPD may be involved in what she calls deliberate and intentional concealment of information. Jailhouse informant Kenny Boagni ties former LAPD officers David Mack and Rafael Perez to the murder of rap star Biggie Smalls. LAPD has withheld reams of other evidence as well, including at least 2 other jailhouse statements implicating dirty cops Mack and Perez in Biggie's murder. 1,000 pages of information were withheld describing Mack and Perez's involvement in Biggie's murder. 3 different jailhouse informants who offered to wear a wire were all turned down by LAPD. A wire, say informants, that could have caught jailed officer Perez boasting about his involvement with Death Row Records and the Biggie Smalls murder. Judge Florence Marie Cooper lists all the new information she says links former crooked LAPD officers David Mack and Rafael Perez to the murder of Biggie Smalls. The sheer volume of the information, says the judge, belies any LAPD argument that it comes from just another jailhouse informant.
Murder is pretty simple. The first person you go after is the spouse.
Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too, but see, because Perez and Reg was good friends, and Perez and Sarita and Reg is great friends, and so all those three together was trying to plot. Those guys, if you go back and watch the film, they was already stalking Pac, watching him. So that just tipped the iceberg when something happened. But there was a plan already to do something to him. Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? He was actually a good kid too, you know? I'm quite sure if they saw the first one, they saw the second one, because it's the same circle of people.
You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
Okay, this is part 10 of the Russell Poole Theory into the murders of Tupac and Biggie. And so there's chaos at Death Row Records, and the investigation is supposed to go right back, and it's supposed to lead to Orlando Anderson. He's getting offered up to Las Vegas police, but they're not buying it. They don't think that Orlando Anderson had anything to do with the shooting. There were basically three different things that start all at once. You have the Tupac Shakur is alive, and so that narrative gets put out. You have the Orlando Anderson was the shooter. That narrative gets put out. And you also have the East Coast, West Coast narrative that gets put out. Now keep in mind, these are chaos merchants. This is a criminal defense attorney that has planned a murder. And he's planned a murder with LAPD cops, with Compton cops, and with Las Vegas cops. And so this murder, they're going to attack the evidence right away. They're going to attack it at the death certificate, which has flaws. They're going to attack it at the coroner's report, which has flaws. They're going to attack this in every way they can. And the greatest defense against a murder is the fact that the person is not dead. And so this is something that they're constantly pushing, these three narratives in the Tupac Shakur case. And you'll notice with the trolls that when they don't get away with one kind of a narrative, the trolls on comments, they start with another. And when I say trolls, I'm not talking about real people. I'm talking about fake accounts that get set up, and they have no history, and they just start leaving these crazy comments. And when they find one narrative gets constantly deleted, they immediately switch and go to another narrative. And they're constantly trying to sell the East Coast, West Coast, the fact that they're trying to sell the East Coast, West Coast. They're trying to sell the Orlando Anderson was the shooter narrative, or they're trying to sell the Tupac is alive narrative. And so there's this chaos now that's going on at Death Row Records. And you have Suge Knight, who is locked up. His probation has been violated. He's going to go to prison. He's sitting in jail in Los Angeles. And at the time, we were told that Suge Knight coordinated the hit on Biggie Smalls with cell phones. Now, we checked out whether or not that was possible. And in Los Angeles County Jail, back then at the time, with cell phone technology and what have you, not possible. It's not possible that Suge Knight was coordinating that hit from jail. Now, since then, I also interviewed somebody who was in jail at the time with Suge Knight, the night that Biggie was killed. And there is no way that Suge Knight could have possibly been involved in the murder of Biggie Smalls. He wasn't at least directly involved. Now, it's not that he didn't give the order previously. It's not that he wasn't somehow involved in it. It just wasn't that he was on cell phones that night coordinating the hit from his jail cell. That we found very impossible to happen. And it's part of why Russell wanted to apologize to Suge Knight and try and get his cooperation in solving both of these murders. And that's why Russell was going to his meeting to meet with the sheriffs. Now, I've since talked to one of the witnesses who had gone to the feds and said that Suge Knight had tried to get him to kill Biggie Smalls previously. Now, it's possible that that happened, but by this time, I think Suge Knight's only thinking about himself. How's he going to get an appeal? Is he going to get an appeal? And what's he going to do with Death Row Records? Well, the smartest thing would have been to just completely shut down Death Row Records and just keep the royalties coming into his account, but that's not what happened. He lets Reggie Wright Jr. Run Death Row Records, and he does that after the murder of Biggie Smalls and after the murder of Officer Kevin Gaines. Now keep in mind that Officer Kevin Gaines was dating Sharitha, and there was a rift between him and Suge Knight. And Officer Kevin Gaines was becoming unraveled. He was involved in the Biggie Smalls killing, and the Biggie Smalls killing really is pretty simple and pretty easily documented, and the Wallace civil trials pretty much cover that with lots of paperwork. Amir Muhammad was the shooter. Here again, a shooter that they could cut loose if the shooter got caught. The ammo this time, though, was used. It was Gecko. Armor-piercing rounds were used because it was an experience modification from the previous. They didn't use a gangbanger shooter. They used a professional assassin in Amir Muhammad. And who was involved? It's the same group of people. It's Rafael Perez, Kevin Gaines, David Mack, Reggie Wright Jr., Reggie Wright Sr., and the hip-hop cop says that Compton police were hired for security for Biggie. So they were there at the Peterson Automotive Museum. And it was a similar military-grade operation, and there was a structure that they were coordinating it from, very similar, with the radios, the scanners, the whole thing. There's a gun that gets dropped right out of a car, right in front of the fire department. Guy gets out, fires a few rounds into the air, and then drives off. Well, the fire department's obviously going to call that in, and that happens minutes before the shooting. So all the good cops get pulled away. The corrupt cops are there to kill Biggie Smalls. And this is how the Biggie Smalls killing went down. And here again, this galvanizes the East Coast, West Coast, and then there's the Kevin Gaines killing, and the Bank of America security hears that it sounds like some kind of an assassination that's happening. They're told by their superiors not to say anything and to let it go because they didn't want to get involved in what looked like a hit sanctioned by LAPD. And years later, we have Frank Liga, who says he knew exactly who he was shooting when he pulled the trigger. And Russell Poole found that very, very disturbing. He said had he known that at the time, that the Gaines-Liga incident would never have been cleared. There's no way he would have cleared Liga if he knew that Liga knew who he was shooting when he shot. And so this does appear that it's somehow involved with Death Row Records. Now, it could be that when these two murders were offered up to Suge Knight, that's when he put Reggie Wright in charge. And that's when all of the chaos at Death Row Records stopped. Now, there's a lot of reasons why we believe all of this. There's a lot of evidence that's poured in. We have a lot more to discuss. Awful lot more to the Russell Poole theory, but this gives you kind of a thumbnail sketch of the Russell Poole theory in the murders of Tupac and Biggie. And there's more to talk about. There's the bank robbery with David Mack, but the same MO, scanners, radios, chase vehicles, to be able to escape as the Biggie Smalls killing. And there's the evidence that goes missing out of evidence lockers with Rafael Perez. There's the Gaines-Liga shooting that we need to go in depth on. But this concludes today's look into the Russell Poole theory of the murders of Tupac and Biggie.
Murder is pretty simple. The first person you go after is the spouse.
All the artists at Death Row was willing to come with me.
David Mack worked for you, right?
No, ma'am.
Never?
Never met him. Never heard of him.
Didn't know who he was until the accusations that he possibly did work for me. And that's been investigated by LAPD and all of that.
3 different jailhouse informants who offered to wear a wire were all turned down by LAPD. A wire, say informants, that could have caught jailed Officer Perez boasting about his involvement with death row records and the Biggie Smalls murder.
Why would I want a paper trail when I never brought him around nowhere? So if I'm gonna hide him in secret, you think I'm gonna let somebody catch a paper trail? They were paid cash by Snoop.
Perez is a good friend to David Max, who both were good friends of Gaines.
Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too, but see, because Perez and Reg was good friends, and Perez and Sarita and Reg is great friends, and so all those 3 together was trying to plot.
While we were at the scene, we received a clue that Gaines had a girlfriend that lived in Hollywood Hills. And when we got there, it turned out that his girlfriend was Sharitha Knight, who was the estranged wife of the owner of Death Row Records.
How about Rafael Perez?
Never heard of him until all the incidents happened.
Those guys, if you go back and watch the film, they was already stalking Pac, watching him. So that just tipped the iceberg when something happened. But there was a plan already to do something to him.
So why does everyone keep telling me that David Mack was working for you?
Yeah. I never heard that.
You've never heard that?
That he worked for me.
You've never heard that?
Wait a minute. Let me clear that up. I'm saying by anyone that's credible, that will work around there or anything. Like I said, that was all investigated by LAPD. I turned over my payroll, everything.
3 different jailhouse informants who offered to wear a wire were all turned down by LAPD. A wire, say informants, that could have caught jailed Officer Perez boasting about his involvement with Death Row Records and the Biggie Smalls murder.
You always say, those are Reggie people.
Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? He was actually a good kid, too, you know? I'm quite sure if they saw the first one, they saw the second one, because it's the same circle of people.
We had to sing this judge today, who I've been in front of before. The atmosphere in this room in this deposition is pretty formal looking.
Right.
We're in a big, nice conference room. This judge is trying to help us.
Right.
Sitting there off the record, like giving me advice.
No, he ain't.
Yeah, he's sitting there saying, before we go on the record, let me give you some clues. And he's sort of telling me what I should say, and then what he's going to say, and this.
Wow.
Yeah.
On the criminal side, he's acknowledged that 57 cases involving 99 suspects are tainted either by perjured testimony, falsification of evidence, or probable cause.
A lying police officer goes to the very heart, to the core of the criminal justice system. 99% of your cases, maybe that's an exaggeration, 90% at least, of your cases rely on the veracity of your police officer. If you cannot trust your police officer, you don't have a case. You don't have a criminal justice system.
You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
It's the same people, same circle of people. It have nothing to do with me, you know?